Adelaide Arcade history. The elegant Adelaide Arcade is a beautiful and intriguing example of South Australia's living history. Opened in December 1885 to widespread acclaim, its distinctive domes, ornate details, and architectural grandeur had never before been seen in Adelaide. It took 200 workers an unprecedented 5 months to complete Adelaide Arcade and the adjoining Gaze Arcade. Considered extremely progressive at the time, new building materials and techniques were used, and it was one of the very first buildings in Adelaide to have electric lights. Featuring Carrara marble floors, glass-paneled ceilings, and extra-wide promenades, the Adelaide Arcade was a place of opulence. The official opening reflected this grandeur, with street closures, crowds of onlookers, a visit from the governor, and an orchestra playing the Adelaide Arcade Polka, especially composed for the occasion. At the time of its opening, the arcade housed 50 shops. Store owners would retail their wares from the ground floor, while their workrooms, accessed via an internal staircase, were located above on the first floor. The addition of a balcony level in 1968 doubled the number of stores in the Adelaide Arcade and provided the beautiful aesthetic we still enjoy inside the arcade to this day. In a life spanning 3 centuries, Adelaide Arcade has been home to many interesting tenants. One of the most exotic was the Turkish baths, where you had your choice of warm baths for $1 or Turkish baths for 4 shillings. Beneath the main floor was an underground chamber where patrons could enjoy refreshments. While the entrance was closed for many years, the tea rooms are now visible through a glass floor that has been built over the original ironwork staircase. The uniqueness of the Adelaide Arcade doesn't reside solely with the retailers. Did you know the arcade has its own coat of arms, visible beneath the domes? Or that the fountain at the Rundle Mall entrance moved homes many times before finally coming to rest in its current location? The balconette at the Grenfell Street end was designed as an orchestral gallery where bands played and grand balls were held in Gaze Arcade. The arcade also saw the unfortunate and gruesome death of the resident caretaker in 1887. Rumor has it his ghost still walks the promenade at night. The arcade has seen many changes through the years, from the addition of central trading booths in the 30s, the introduction of the balcony level in the 60s, and a major fire in the 80s. Over the years, however, the arcade has been lovingly restored to its 19th century glory and maintains its position as the luxurious heart of Adelaide's central retail precinct. Francis Cluney. The haunted Adelaide Arcade has seen more than its fair share of tragedies, starting with a gentleman called Francis Cluney, who was the beadle or caretaker there. Unfortunately, he lost his life in a horrific accident only 2 years after the building opened. He was left in charge of the electric lights whilst the gentleman who should have been in charge, Henry Harcourt, went off to moonlight elsewhere. The lights began to flicker, and Francis went to see what the problem was. Shortly after the lights went out, the reason the lights weren't working was that Francis' body was now wedged firmly in the machinery. It is rumored by psychics that he was pushed to his death by some larrikins who had earlier threatened to put the light out, but there is no supporting evidence. In fact, evidence from the inquest states the contrary, and that he died from a tragic accident after clothing got caught up in the machinery. He died instantly with horrific injuries to his body, all of which were reported in the newspapers at the time. Francis' presence has been noted often, especially by new residents, a bit of a welcome to the arcade. He has been known to knock things over in shops, interfere with electrical items, and even appear as a full-bodied apparition, wearing the long coat he was renowned for. Francis may still be diligently carrying out his duties to this day, and just letting everyone know that he is still around. Thomas Horton. Although Thomas Horton was not a resident at the arcade, he did contribute to more tragedy there. Thomas Horton was a bootmaker by trade, and also a talented juggler. He had recently married a young lady called Florence, Flory, but things were not going well for them. Thomas was a jealous and violent man, and Florence could take no more, so eventually left him. Only 3 months after their wedding, he shot and killed his now estranged wife whilst in Arcade Lane, which ran between Adelaide and Regent Arcades. She was taken to a nearby shop but had already passed away. After initially running away and presumed dead, Thomas was caught a few days later up in the Adelaide Hills and taken to the Adelaide Gaol. At his trial for Flory's murder, his mother stated that as a child, Thomas had fallen 13 feet out of a tree, suffering severe head injuries. She thought this could be the reason why he acted the way he did. But the most damning thing for Thomas at his trial was a letter written by his deceased wife and stating that if anything should happen to her, it would be by the hand of her husband, Thomas. It told of her unhappy life with Thomas and about the beatings and accusations. Thomas was found guilty of Florrie's murder and sentenced to hang by the neck until dead at the Adelaide Gaol. His body remains there to this day, a final punishment. Sidney Kennedy Byron. Another sad tale to be told is about Bridget Kennedy Byron, who shared a shop at the arcade with her husband, Professor Kennedy. She was a fortune teller and palmist, and he was a phrenologist. They had marital issues, and he left her for another, taking with him their toddler son Sidney. Devastated, Bridget hired a private investigator, and eventually her son was returned. But then tragedy struck, which resulted in Sidney sadly losing his life, with Bridget initially being blamed. Gas could be smelled in the arcade, and it was traced to Bridget's shop. Inside, they found little Sidney, life extinct, and his mother unconscious. Bridget was arrested for his murder and taken to the Adelaide Gaol. At her trial, it was found that there was not enough evidence, and it was thrown out of court. Things didn't end well for Bridget as she turned to drink, and a few months later, she was found dead in the West Parklands. She'd been poisoned. Who poisoned her? We may never know. Mother and child are buried together at West Terrace Cemetery, although their final resting place bears only Sidney's name. It has been rumored that female ghosts or spirits walk the floors of the arcade, which have been picked up on by psychics and mediums. But we haven't had a verifiable sighting reported to date, and in our many official investigations there, have had no response from a female. There have been reports of tenants hearing children running around the arcade at strange hours of the day and night. No children can be found. One is possibly little Sidney. The other is unknown as yet.